were Poverty Row quickies.
A lot of people say that he didn't have good career management, but on the other hand, that was just the way he was. He loved to work, and no matter what quality the picture was that he was in, he always gave a first-class performance.
And I feel myself going back to the animal instinct. I try to fight it. I lock myself in there with him, fearing that I might do something terrible.
One bright spot in this otherwise bleak period was offered by executives at RKO Studios. They thought that their production of Robert Louis Stevenson's The Body Snatcher would be aided immeasurably by the teaming of Bela with his old co-star, Boris Karloff.
That part was not in the original script. And then somebody in the front office said, gee, wouldn't it be great if we could say Karloff and Lugosi? So that role of the porter was created to be able to cast Lugosi.
You and I should work together.
You mean we would sell the bodies to the doctors together? Dig them up.
There'll be no digging. The kirkyards are too well guarded.
Lugosi was not well at all in the picture. It was just a question of patience and working with Lugosi because of his health problem, whatever it was.
He had a leg pain problem that started many years back and had been prescribed some drugs for that pain, and he became medically addicted to those drugs.
This medical addiction was for now a well-kept Hollywood secret. Bela Lugosi was still capable of giving a fine performance. But in Hollywood, giving a fine performance is never enough. Bela Lugosi would have to give more. Now in his mid-60s and suffering from chronic back pain, Lugosi maintained an exhausting work schedule, one which included extensive touring in stock theater.
I appeared in Dracula, a production of Dracula in 1947 in a summer theater production with him. I was with him one night, and his wife was along, and he was talking about some of the things he'd done on the stage in Budapest, and his wife came in with, he was the John Barrymore of the Budapest stage. And with that, Lugosi broke in and very seriously said, no, I was the Clark Gable of the Budapest stage. And he was quite serious.
Count Dracula sleeps in this coffin, but rises every night at sunset. Chick is right. This is awful silly stuff.
In 1948, Bela accepted his last assignment for a major studio in Universal's send-up of Dracula, Frankenstein, and the Wolfman. The comedy classic Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. Reprising the role that made him famous, Bela still managed to look vigorous and youthful. His performance was considered a triumph. But by now, the Gothic screen monsters of the 1930s were considered quaint and old-fashioned, especially when contrasted to the real horrors of World War II and the nuclear age. Far too old to play leading men and far too ill to play much else, Bela was often out of work.
The story is begun.
Desperate, he accepted a small role in an ultra-low-budget exploitation picture directed by a young man with more ambition than talent, Edward D. Wood, Jr.
If the Creator had meant us to be born girls, we certainly would have been born girls.
Are we sure?
The film was a bizarre and disjointed mix of transvestitism and pseudo-sociology.
Give this man satin undies, a dress, a sweater, and a skirt. He's the happiest individual in the world.
Bela's role was curious at best, but as usual, he gave it his all.
Beware of the big green dragon that sits on your doorstep. He eats little boys. Puppy duck tails and big fat snails. Beware. Take care. Beware.
Banned in several states due to its highly controversial subject matter, the film was a critical and box office disaster.
Ed Wood put him in his movies because of Dad's name. The movies that he put my father in were terrible, and I'm sorry to see him in those kind of movies. But looking at it from my dad's point of view, he was working. Ed Wood gave him something to do, which was really very important to him.
It is the hour.
In 1953, Bela made a rare television appearance on the popular program You Asked For It.
You have no will of your own.
Just 5 years after his performance in Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, Bela Lugosi could no longer hide the ravages of old age and the years of addiction to painkillers.
You ask for it.
Lonely, infirm, and impoverished, Bela Lugosi found that his only friends were the children that he had delighted for 2 decades as Dracula.
I discovered Bela in Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. I became his super fan. And there was a little group of kids. We got our nerve up and called on the phone. Told them that we were fans and we would like to meet him. He said, sure, come over, boys. And we did. And that's what started a 3-year glory trail of all kinds of adventures with him.
Unable to find suitable employment, Bela now worked exclusively for Ed Wood. Their next screen picture, Bride of the Monster, allowed the actor a final screen soliloquy that poignantly echoed his own compromised circumstances.
Now I am here, sent to bring you home.
I have no home. Hunted, despised, living like an animal, that I will show the world that I can be its master.
By 1954, Lugosi's lifestyle and chemical dependency had severely damaged both his health and his marriage.
It was very hard for both my mother and my father to separate and become divorced. They loved each other very much, but my mother just could not get along anymore with the way he was in his later years. My mother was always trying to help him not be addicted. She would administer the shots, and I know that she would give him shots with nothing in it from time to time, just to try and help him out. And all this took its toll.
Following the breakup of his marriage, Bela made several unsuccessful attempts to give up the morphine he had become addicted to. Finally, in the spring of 1955, he committed himself for treatment. Now out in the open, Lugosi's physical problems and pathetic circumstances earned him more press than he had received in years. But the images of Bela that were circulated all over the country were more frightening than any movie the actor ever made.
The newspapers, unfortunately, gave a kind of a tabloid touch to it all. You know, Dracula discovered to be drug fiend, that sort of thing, and it was rather humiliating. Actually, he was a rather brave individual.
To the public, Bela's distress seemed like the final curtain for a faded star. But the actor had made a career of rebounding from difficult circumstances. Bela Lugosi would be back. 3 months after his voluntary commitment to a state hospital for narcotic addiction, Bela Lugosi astounded the world with a full recovery. The seemingly rejuvenated 72-year-old actor was the first Hollywood star to ever go public with a drug-related problem.
Mr. Lugosi, you're leaving the state hospital tomorrow. Yes, I'm very happy I do, on account that I became a new man, new lease of life. I'm cured.
During his weeks of rehabilitation, Lugosi had received regular and encouraging mail from a woman by the name of Hope Lininger, a longtime fan who signed her letters, "A Dash of Hope." Upon his release, he sought her out, and soon Hope Lininger became the 5th Mrs. Bela Lugosi.
About 25 years earlier, she determined that one day she would be Mrs. Lugosi. Finally, indeed, her dream came true, but it turned out to be more of a nightmare to her, that the man that she married was not the handsome, charismatic Dracula that she had once dreamed of. A conflict
developed because Bela, with all his relationships with females, he was what we in Spanish would call macho. Hope was extremely dedicated to him. She took care of him, but she just didn't let him have that dominance in the household that he was apparently used to when he was married to Lillian. I feel that he was really still in love with Lillian all this time, and that Hope came in as a replacement.
Bela had hoped that his well-publicized recovery would result in goodwill and new offers from the entertainment industry. But while goodwill was plentiful, offers for work were not. Offers from anyone, that is, except Ed Wood. For a proposed film called The Vampire's Tomb, Wood photographed Lugosi walking around a nearby graveyard. It would later be incorporated into his 1959 cult classic, Plan 9 from Outer Space. But sadly, Bela's dreams of a comeback were not to be. On August 16, 1956, death came quietly to the 73-year-old actor who had made a screen career playing characters who never died.
He never did lose his pride. He knew what he had accomplished in his lifetime. Yet his circumstances were not good near the end of his life. I'm glad that he could be working all the way down to the end. He died with a script in his hand.
Bela had always said that he wanted to be buried in his cape, and Hope said, let's do it. And I said, well, if you're going to do that, then let's go all the way and send his full dress to the mortuary. And that's what he was buried in.
I remember standing by his coffin. I thought, well, Bela, it's almost as though you might expect a director to call cut and that you would rise from your coffin one more time. He looked very, very impressive in death.
To the very end, Bela Lugosi, the proud Hungarian who had run away from home at the age of 12 to become an actor, still believed fervently in the resurrection of his own career. Had he lived just a few more years, Bela Lugosi would have seen the beginnings of new interest in his films through television, magazines, and fan clubs. Appearing on everything from T-shirts to video cassettes, Bela and his films had become more popular than ever.
I don't think that he ever imagined that he would be remembered today, and he would really be very heartened to know that.
In 1995, actor Martin Landau received an Oscar for his inspired portrayal of Bela Lugosi in the film Ed Wood. But for many, it was a long overdue tribute, not only to Landau, but to Lugosi.
I wanted this to be not just a performance, but almost like the performance he never got at the end of his life. I understand the pain and the fact that he couldn't do at the end of his life what he wanted to do most, which was perform and act in good roles.
I think down deep, he knew that he was a good actor. So he just enjoyed this vampire thing that happened to him.
He was kind of haunted by it. He said something like, you know, Dracula never dies.
If Bela Lugosi were alive today, I think he would have a proud smile on his face, knowing that he is regarded not only as a great actor by a great many people, but also as a great man.
With all his problems, he was a very human individual, and he was a good friend.
Just like his acting, he lived bigger than life. I remember my dad every time I see him on the screen. I still remember him.